Namaskar, a warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Abhijit Loreng and with me is Nishit Kumar, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds second India-Australia virtual summit with his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison. Reviews progress made on various initiatives under Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. India's public broadcaster Prasar Bharati inks Memorandum of Understanding with Australia's Special Broadcasting Service to boost cooperation in broadcasting field. New Delhi exports defence items to nearly 80 friendly foreign countries. China's Eastern Boeing 737 with 132 on board crashes in South China's Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi expresses shock and sadness over the incident. US President Joe Biden to visit Europe this week for urgent talks with NATO and European allies amid military action in Ukraine. Slovenia Prime Minister Janez Janša urges European Union nations to send diplomatic staff back to Ukraine to support the war-torn country. And in sports, 13th FISA International Championships World Para-Athletics Grand Prix begins in Dubai. As we start the bulletin, we appeal to our listeners to stay safe from COVID-19 by following these 4 simple steps. Get fully vaccinated, wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing and focus on hand and face hygiene. And now, the news in detail. The second India-Australia virtual summit was held on Monday. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison took stock of the progress made on various initiatives under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. They discussed views on regional and international issues. In his opening remarks at the summit, Mr. Modi said, in the last few years, the relations between India and Australia have made remarkable progress. He said both the nations have very close cooperation in several areas, including trade and investment, defence and security, education and innovation, and science and technology. Prime Minister Modi said the bilateral collaboration has also grown rapidly in many other areas, such as critical minerals, water management, renewable energy and COVID-19 research. He welcomed the announcement of the establishment of a Centre for Excellence for Critical and Emerging Technology Policy in Bangalore. Mr. Modi said the conclusion of the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement will be important for our economic ties, economic revival and economic security.
मुझे पूरा विश्वास है सीका का शीघ्र समापन हमारे आर्थिक संबंधों, इकोनॉमिक रिवाइवल और इकोनॉमिक सिक्योरिटी के लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण होगा। कोविड में भी हमारे बीच अच्छा सहयोग चल रहा है। हमारा यह सहयोग फ्री, ओपन और इंक्लूसिव इंडो पैसिफिक के प्रति हमारी प्रतिबद्धता को दर्शाता है।
Prime Minister Modi also thanked Mr. Morrison for taking the initiative to return ancient Indian antiquities.
प्राचीन भारतीय कलाकृतियों को लौटाने की पहल के लिए मैं आपको विशेष रूप से धन्यवाद देना चाहता हूं। और आपने जो कलाकृतियां भेजी हैं, इनमें राजस्थान, पश्चिम बंगाल, गुजरात, हिमाचल प्रदेश, इसके साथ कई अन्य भारतीय राज्यों में से अवैध तरीके से निकाली गई सैकड़ों वर्ष पुरानी मूर्तियां और चित्र हैं। और इसके लिए मैं सभी भारतवासियों की तरफ से आपका विशेष आभार व्यक्त करता हूं।
Prime Minister Modi expressed his condolences on the destruction caused by severe flooding in New South Wales and Queensland and the resultant loss of lives. He thanked the Australian Prime Minister for taking care of the Indian community, including Indian students in Australia during the COVID-19 pandemic. Both the leaders also appreciated the increasing strategic convergence between the two countries as fellow democracies with shared values and common interests, which include a free, open, inclusive and prosperous Indo-Pacific. A joint statement was issued on the occasion covering various aspects of the deepening comprehensive strategic partnership. Both sides also agreed to establish annual summits between the Prime Ministers under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, thus adding a special dimension to the bilateral relationship. Briefing reporters in New Delhi after the summit, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla said it was a very fruitful, constructive and warm exchange of views. He said the summit reflected the close ties that exist between both the countries. Mr. Shringla said both the leaders stressed on the high priority they attached to the bilateral relationship and the keen focus to further enhance the comprehensive strategic partnership between the two countries. He said the leaders exchanged perspectives about regional and multilateral matters and global issues of mutual interest, including shared concerns such as terrorism.
In a reiteration of our commitment to a progressive Indo-Pacific region, both leaders discussed calibrating and cooperating with each other on support to Pacific Island countries for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and in combating climate change through initiatives like the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure.
India's public broadcaster Prasar Bharati on Monday signed a memorandum of understanding with Australia's public service broadcaster Special Broadcasting Service to boost cooperation in the field of broadcasting. This will expand the reach of DD News, DD India and multiple language services of DD News amongst the Indian diaspora in Australia. Through this MOU, the two broadcasters will explore opportunities in co-production and joint broadcasting of programs spanning across multiple genres. They will also exchange programs, radio and television content in the fields of culture, education, science, entertainment, sports, news, travel, music and arts. Both public broadcasters will also exchange professionals and organize their training to share knowledge on technical know-how and program production. They will provide facilities and general assistance, including supply of information and other organizational and technical assistance to each other. Briefing media after the virtual summit, Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla said the MOU would allow for exchange of programs, expertise in this sector and would facilitate daily slots on TV channels in Australia for DD India, DD News and DD Sahyadri.
In a historic move, 29 antiquities have been repatriated to India by Australia. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday inspected the antiquities in New Delhi. The antiquities range in 6 broad categories as per themes. These are Shiva and his disciples, worshipping Shakti, Lord Vishnu and his forms, Jain tradition, portraits and decorative objects. These antiquities come from different time periods, with the earliest dating to 9th to 10th century. Indian External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and his Australian counterpart Alexander Schallenberg held delegation-level talks in Delhi yesterday. Dr. Jaishankar said in a tweet that they held wide-ranging discussions and reviewed the India-Australia bilateral cooperation and identified new economic possibilities. He said he had an interesting evening with the Australian Foreign Minister who spent his early years in New Delhi. India is exporting defence items to about 80 friendly foreign countries and is also involved in negotiations to deepen defence ties with them. In a written reply in the Rajya Sabha, the upper house of parliament, on Monday, the Minister of State for Defence, Ajay Bhatt, said the government has taken up many reforms to boost defence exports and enhance ease of doing business in recent times.
In today's hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on the crisis of confidence in Pakistan. In conversation are Vishnu Prakash, former diplomat, and Simran Sodhi, journalist.
Today we are discussing the developments that have been taking place in Pakistan of late. We see that there is a no confidence motion being moved against Prime Minister Imran Khan. And we also have reports coming out of Pakistan that the Pakistan military, which is the strongest institution in the country, also seems to have withdrawn its support to the Prime Minister. Ambassador Prakash, when you see what is unfolding in Pakistan, how do you look at the general stability, instability that will fall out with what we are seeing in Pakistan today?
I think from all accounts, Prime Minister Imran Khan is living on borrowed time. His mistake was that he started believing or behaving like an elected Prime Minister, whereas the fact is that he is and was a selected Prime Minister. He committed the cardinal mistake of taking on the army. In Pakistan, we all know that the de facto power rests with the army and you cannot mess with them. And the opposition has united. Granted that the unity is ephemeral and it is basically to dethrone Imran Khan, but at the moment, all opposition parties have united and there is tremendous pressure. Prime Minister Imran Khan has not really distinguished himself as an administrator. He has been erratic. We know that from all media reports that there has been rampant corruption. The economy is in shambles. The inflation is high. And there have been various acts of omission and commission. So it would appear that unless a miracle happens, the days of Prime Minister Imran Khan are numbered.
Ambassador Prakash, how do you think this affects the region, especially India, and of course we have Afghanistan where Pakistan exerts a lot of influence. Do you think that this political instability in Pakistan will also affect the political, what we see, the atmosphere in Afghanistan? And to a lesser extent, it also makes India watch the situation more closely, not only in Pakistan, but in the region also.
When has Pakistan been stable? Pakistan has always been unstable, and when there have had periods of stability under the army, the direct control of the army has followed generally an approach which has not been conducive to peace and stability and friendly relations with India. Barring some periods, you have been following, I know Pakistan very closely, I don't want to get into that, but we all know that every effort that India made to find a modus vivendi with Pakistan resulted in a terror incident and was rebuffed basically by the armed forces. That said, I guess we have factored in that instability. The relationship at the moment between India and Pakistan is not the best, to say the least. Fortunately, there is ceasefire at the border and which is holding. It is a positive sign. There is daylight between Pakistan, especially the civilian government, and the Taliban in Afghanistan. Pakistan certainly helped Taliban to come to power, especially the dreaded Haqqani group. But what have they delivered? Haqqani group or the ruling establishment in Afghanistan needs financial assistance, needs recognition. Nothing is forthcoming, and Pakistan does not have the ability. Already there are serious differences cropping up between Taliban and Afghanistan. So I do not think that it will make much of a difference, because the relation, we have factored in all these dislocations and the difficulties, the political instability that Pakistan has been facing. Maybe there will be an unstable period in Pakistan, but well, that is of their own making.
Mr. Prakash, if we were to specifically talk about Pakistan's relationship in the region, and we have seen them getting very close to China, for instance, and to some extent where we have also said that Pakistan today is more like a satellite country to China rather than being wholly independent. Do you feel somewhere that the political events that take place in Pakistan are also watched today by bigger powers like China, because they have stakes there, they have investments there, and for example, countries like the US. So how do you see the global community reacting, also given the fact that Pakistan has nuclear weapons? So it makes the situation a little more tricky that you have a country which has nuclear weapons and it is going through this phase where the army is of course all powerful, but at least they had some appearance of a democracy, which also seems to be falling away now.
If they had, I think you characterize it very well, appearance of democracy, it has been generally a veneer of democracy. And even when there has been a so-called civilian government, the effective levers of power have been with the army, because it is well known that on issues or subjects like India, USA, Saudi Arabia, China, the nuclear button, security and defense matters, army has a veto and the army has the control. And the army is an all-powerful army which has basically a law unto itself. The relationship between Pakistan and China is very well known. You know, the problem basically is that in the quest for having a raison d'etre to have a preeminent position, that is the army, you know, they have always created a demon, or they have demonized India. They have cooked up a threat perception from India. And in the bargain, they have caused it up. They earlier were causing up to the US and now to China. And the way the Pakistani assets have been handed over or being handed over, whether there is Gwadar port or tracts of land, is very well known. So we can call them a satellite, we can call them a junior partner, but basically they have decided to do the bidding of China, and they are paying the price for that, because already about $40 billion seem to have been invested by China in China-Pakistan economic corridor. Where does Pakistan have the ability to pay back? They have been borrowing from Saudi Arabia, paying to China, borrowing from China, paying to IMF. And they have been paying the price for that, because they have burnt their bridges with the US. The relationship with Saudi Arabia has been affected. But when you are a terror state when you have been cutting the nose to spite the face. That is what is going to happen. And the problem is that the Pakistani economy and the polity is in a free fall. Only they can prevent that, but whether they will prevent it is a $1 million question.
Ambassador Prakash, do you think that the India-Pakistan relation is unlikely to change? We remember the time when Imran Khan became Prime Minister, and those initial weeks, one thought that maybe this relationship could get a little better, could be a little more positive. But we've seen that Pakistan's state policy of sponsoring cross-border terrorism has continued. There has really been no change. Are you optimistic going forward that maybe if we have a change, we have a different leader there, things might change? Or do you think it would be foolish to be optimistic?
I think it is always wise to be optimistic, but one has also to be realistic, because I always maintain that you cannot get bogged down by history. History cannot weigh you down. Yet it is immature to ignore history. And what I had alluded to is that what is the identity of Pakistan from day one? They have consciously created an identity of not India. So you have tried to distance yourself from India. You have tried to create an Islamic identity. You have become an Islamic state. You thought that Islam will be the glue to hold your country together. That never happened. In 71, they separated. Provinces are at war with each other practically. Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa have insurgencies going on. And Pakistan will not desist, despite the fact that, as Hillary Clinton said, that if you raise snakes in your backyard, they are going to sting you. They are paying the price of nurturing terror groups, but, well, that is their policy. And as I alluded to the fact that Pakistani army, to maintain the preeminent position, needs an enemy. Otherwise, how can they justify this kind of an exalted existence? So they are caught in their own web. They from time to time talk of peace, but do the opposite. I would love to be optimistic, but I'm afraid that unless there is a Himalayan shift in the approach, a tectonic shift which is unlikely, I do not see much of a possibility of finding a modus vivendi between India and Pakistan. I think we are destined to live as in contention. I hope that it does not flare up into something more, but to expect a kind of stable ties looks difficult.
With these comments, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates around the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts. A China Eastern Airlines plane with 132 people on board has crashed in southern China's Wongi Zhuang Autonomous Region on Monday. The crashed plane, Boeing 737, was flying from Kunming to Guangzhou when it came down in hills in Wuzhou city in Guangxi province and caught fire. The plane had 132 people on board, including 123 passengers and 9 crew members. The number of casualties, the precise cause of the incident remains undetermined. Rescue operations are underway. State media reported that Chinese President Xi Jinping called for the immediate activation of the emergency mechanism for the plane crash, sparing no efforts on search and rescue and properly handling of the aftermath. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang called for all-out efforts to search for survivors and treat the injured and emphasized the need to reassure and serve the families of the victims. China has had a good air safety record over the past decade, as the country's last major plane accident occurred in August 2010, in which 44 people were killed. Meanwhile, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed shock and sadness over the crash of a passenger flight MU5735 with 132 people on board in China's Guangxi. In a tweet, Mr. Modi said, "Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of the crash and their family members." Hong Kong will lift flight bans from April 1st from 9 countries to contain the spread of highly transmissible Omicron variant. The countries where ban will be lifted include India, Nepal, Pakistan, Australia, Canada, France, Philippines, Britain and the US. The city's chief executive, Carrie Lam, announced this during a press conference on Monday.
U.S. top military commander has said China has fully militarized at least 3 of several islands it built in the disputed South China Sea. China is arming them with anti-ship and anti-aircraft missile systems, laser and jamming equipment, and fighter jets in an increasingly aggressive move that threatens all nations operating nearby. U.S. Indo-Pacific Commander Admiral John C. Aquilino said the hostile actions were in stark contrast to Chinese President Xi Jinping's past assurances that Beijing would not transform the artificial islands in contested waters into military bases. U.S. President Joe Biden will be on a trip to Europe this week for urgent talks with NATO and European allies. During his trip, he will also visit Poland. The visit follows as Russian forces concentrate their fire upon cities in a near month-old conflict with Ukraine. U.S. Press Secretary Jen Psaki in a statement said that Biden will first travel to Brussels and then to Poland to meet the leaders there. Poland is a crucial ally in the Ukraine crisis. It is hosting thousands of American troops and is taking in more people fleeing the war in Ukraine, more than 2 million in the midst of the largest European refugee crisis in decades.
Slovenia says it is planning to send the country's diplomatic representatives back to Ukraine later this week. Prime Minister Janez Janša has urged other European Union nations to do the same. He said on Twitter late on Sunday that Ukraine needs diplomatic support. Slovenia's diplomats left Ukraine with the start of the Russian military operation on February 24th as other countries withdrew their representatives as well. Mr. Janša visited Kyiv last week along with the Prime Ministers of Poland and the Czech Republic. He has said after the visit that Ukraine was feeling abandoned and urged the EU to send the bloc's representative there. Prime Minister Janša said that the return of Slovenia's diplomats will be organized on voluntary basis. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has accused Russia of committing war crimes in Ukraine, most notably in the besieged port city of Mariupol, where hundreds of civilians have been killed. Borrell's remarks on Monday came as he reached Brussels to chair a meeting of the EU foreign ministers.
Ukraine's Prosecutor General said a Russian shell struck a chemical plant outside the city of Sumy a little on Monday, causing a leak in a 50-ton tank of ammonia that took hours to contain. Russian military spokesman Igor Konashkinov claimed the leak was a planned provocation by Ukrainian forces to falsely accuse Russia of a chemical attack. Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett says that while there have been advances in ceasefire talks between Russia and Ukraine, very large gaps remain between the two sides. Mr. Bennett, who has acted as intermediary between the two warring countries in recent weeks, said at a conference on Monday that Israel will continue, together with other friends in the world, to try and bridge the gap and bring an end to the war.
Ukraine's nuclear regulatory agency says the radiation monitors around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, site of the world's worst meltdown in 1986, have stopped working. In a statement on Monday, the agency also said there are no longer firefighters available in the region to protect forests tainted by decades of radioactivity as the weather warms. The plant was seized by Russian forces on February 24th. The United States has transferred a significant number of Patriot anti-missile interceptors to Saudi Arabia in recent weeks. This action seems to ease what has been a point of tension in the increasingly complicated U.S.-Saudi relationship. A senior administration official confirmed that the interceptors have been sent to Saudi Arabia.
United Nations Children's Fund UNICEF has said that 13 million children in Afghanistan are in dire need of international assistance. Stating this, Sam Mott, Communications Chief of UNICEF in Afghanistan, said nearly 4 million children are out of school. 8 out of 10 people in Afghanistan are drinking water infected with bacteria. Sam Mott called on donors to provide $2 billion as soon as possible to provide educational and health services to Afghan children. Deep depression has formed over the North Andaman Sea and adjoining the southeast Bay of Bengal. It is moving northwards off and along Andaman and Nicobar Islands towards Myanmar coastline. It is likely to intensify into a cyclonic storm in the next few hours. Thereafter, it will cross Myanmar coast in the early hours of 23rd March. As per the Meteorological Department, it is moving away 110 kilometers east-southeast of Mayabundar.
World Down Syndrome Day is observed every year on the 21st of March. It is a global campaign which is observed annually to spread awareness about Down syndrome. It is named after the British doctor John Langdon Down, who fully described the syndrome in 1866. The genetic cause of the Down syndrome was discovered in 1959. We have a report.
The day helps educate the public about Down syndrome and to encourage people with Down syndrome to participate in daily activities so that they can live a full life and play a vital role in the community life. The World Down Syndrome Day is being officially observed by the United Nations since 2012. March 21 was selected to signify the uniqueness of the triplication of the 21st chromosome, which causes the Down syndrome. This disorder affects nearly 6,000 babies at birth every year. It is usually associated with physical growth delays, mild to moderate intellectual disability, and characteristic facial features. The average IQ of a young adult with Down syndrome is 50, equivalent to the mental ability of an 8 or 9-year-old child. Anita Anand for World News, AIR.
Today is World Poetry Day. It is observed every year on the 21st of March to celebrate one of humanity's most treasured forms of cultural and linguistic expression and identity. Vice President of India, M. Venkaiah Naidu, has said poetry is the most refined expression of human feelings and emotions. In a tweet, Mr. Naidu said, "Great poetry has universal appeal transcending barriers of time and space." He asked everyone to come together to enrich our great poetic traditions in all languages. A 29-member Indian team led by Paralympian Dharamveer is taking part in the 13th FASA International Championships World Para-Athletics Grand Prix beginning in Dubai on Monday. The championships have kicked off the World Para-Athletics Grand Prix season with around 500 para-athletes from 43 nations to be in action.
Indian men's hockey team registered a thrilling victory against Argentina in the FIH Pro League at the Kalinga Stadium in Bhubaneswar on Sunday evening. After going down in the first leg of their contest against Argentina, India bounced back with a 4-3 win in the second leg through goals from Hardeep Singh in the 17th minute, Jugraj Singh in 20th and 52nd minute, and Mandeep Singh's last-minute goal. The win helped India move to the top of the F1H Pro League points table. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Let us take a look at the press reports on China. Agence France Presse reports China on Sunday imposed stay-at-home orders on millions more people in the country's northeast as it battles its biggest COVID-19 outbreak in 2 years. Business Standard writes, Beijing's overtures to India to revive bilateral dialogue ahead of the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa BRICS summit in China later this year should be welcomed after 2 years of military confrontation along the line of actual control.
Now let us have a look what made headlines in Nepal. The print reports on the upcoming visit of China's Foreign Minister Wongi to Nepal. The report adds that the visit is part of Beijing's attempt to push its agenda in Kathmandu. Vion writes that Nepal appointed Dr. Shankar Prasad Sharma as its ambassador to India.
Republica writes that the construction of the Manhaya Sampatya 132 kV transmission line deemed important for the exchange of electricity between Nepal and India has gained momentum. Let us take a look at what made the headlines in Bangladesh. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina inaugurated the 1,320 megawatt Pyara thermal power plant on Monday, reports Daily Star. With this, Bangladesh has achieved 100% electricity coverage of the country. A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds the second India-Australia virtual summit with his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison, reviews progress made on various initiatives under comprehensive strategic partnership. India's public broadcaster Prasar Bharati inks memorandum of understanding with Australia's Special Broadcasting Service to boost cooperation in broadcasting field. New Delhi exports defense items to nearly 80 friendly foreign countries. China's Eastern Boeing 737 with 132 on board crashes in South China's Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed his shock and sadness over the incident. US President Joe Biden to visit Europe this week for urgent talks with NATO and European allies amid military action in Ukraine. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan, Vaishnava Jan, by artists from Namibia on their Independence Day.
Vaishnava Jan to tene kahiye je peer parai jane rahe par dukhe upkare kare toye man abhiman nane rahe sakala loke ma saune bande nindana kare Khachamana nishchal rakhe dan dan janani.
And with that we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.